topics and opinions expressed in the following show are solely those of the host and their guests and not those of W4CY Radio, its employees, or affiliates. We make no recommendations or endorsements for radio show programs, services, or products mentioned on air or on our web. No liability, explicit or implied, shall be extended to W4CY Radio or its employees or affiliates. Any questions or comments should be directed to those show hosts. Thank you for choosing W4CY Radio.
What's working on purpose anyway? Each week, we ponder the answer to this question. People ache for meaning and purpose at work, to contribute their talents passionately and know their lives really matter. They crave being part of an organization that inspires them and helps them grow into realizing their highest potential. Business can be such a force for good in the world, elevating humanity. In our program, we provide guidance and inspiration to help usher in this world we all want, working on purpose. Now, here's your host, Dr. Elise Cortez.
Welcome back to the Working in Purpose program. Thanks for tuning in this week. Great to have you. We have been on air since February of 2015, and I do this program with passion and purpose. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. If we have not met yet, and you don't know me, I'm a management consultant, organizational logotherapist, speaker, and author. My team and I at Elise Cortez and Associates help companies to enliven and fortify their operations by articulating their purpose and building inspirational leaders and cultures activated by meaning and purpose to turn those companies from a flatline EKG to a vibrant destination workplace. There, people are intrinsically motivated to perform at their best, grow to their fuller potential, and are committed to stay and dynamically deliver on the company's mission. You can learn more about us and how we can work together at EliseCortez.com. Now, getting into today's program, with us is Wendy Leschgold. She is the co-founder of Fast Forward Group, a professional development executive coaching company. We'll be talking about the new book she co-wrote with Lisa McCarthy called Fast Forward, 5 Power Principles to Create the Life You Want in Just 1 Year. As you know, today from Los Angeles, California, Wendy, welcome to Working on Purpose.
Thank you so much. Nice to be here.
Nice to have you. And I want to congratulate you and Lisa on this fantastic work. I know what it is to bring a book into the world. As my guests or as our listeners have heard me say several times, it's harder than bringing in a baby, or easier than bringing in a baby. Harder.
It took longer than 9 months too.
Let's get it right. It is harder than bringing a baby in the world, and I've done both. So I think you have too.
Yes, I definitely have.
Okay, good. Well, let's just start here. I know a little something about you because I've read your book, but my listeners and viewers haven't. So would you just start by saying a little bit about your background and why you and Lisa felt compelled to write this book and do the work that you are together today? And I know you have to say something about the fact that you're childhood friends as well.
Yeah. Okay. So yes, Lisa and I met each other a very, very, very long time ago. We met when we were girls in sleepaway camp. And I always say sleepaway camp friends are the best friends. Mm-hmm. And we stayed connected. We stayed really, really great friends. And we always had this dream that one day we would work together. And, you know, we were in similar industries. We both were, I was in advertising, she was in media. And we kind of were on this career journey, having families, building our careers. And then we found ourselves really jointly at a crossroads about 11 years ago. And she was sort of going through reorg number 568, at her company. And I was at a point, at that point, I had my own executive coaching practice and found myself, finally with my youngest child in school, able to travel more, and wanting to just impact more people. And so we joined forces, really decided, okay, the someday we're going to work together is going to be today. And we, with a lot of fear, but a lot of excitement, launched the Fast Forward Group with a vision of transforming workplaces and cultures and helping people to be the best they could be professionally, but also not have to put their life on hold while they were doing that and do their very best work. And that has really been the mission of the Fast Forward Group over the last 11 years. We've, been able to work with a lot of people from a lot of really awesome companies. And, what led us to write the book is knowing that there are many people out there that might find themselves in two camps. One camp is they were lucky enough to work for a company that hired the Fast Forward Group. They did the program and they were looking for a way to just keep it in their life. It's a really, really great actionable system, and it's great to have a reminder. And then the bulk of the people in the world have not done the Fast Forward program because they have not worked at Google or Facebook or Amazon or TikTok or Chase or, these other big companies, but they are interested in learning how to do that too at their workplace. And so we wrote the book for them as well.
That's beautiful, Wendy. I just really appreciate that service, and I relate to that very, very strongly. So what I like to do in my program, Wendy, is it's one part education, one part inspiration. And it's really curated content. So you'll notice that the things I put out that I wanted to talk about, some of it, it's not just the full description of your book or the full contents of your book. I'm pulling out the pieces that I think really speak to something that we haven't really spoken to much yet on the program. So the first thing I want to put forth in that I found really compelling and really in line with here is, one of your principles speaks to the massive value of bold vision. And I loved what you put in there about when we ask people to throw their hats over the wall, this is what we mean. Give yourself something so compelling to play for that you don't have a choice but to go for it.
Hmm.
I love that. And so if you could speak a little bit to this notion of the power of the bold vision.
Yeah. Yeah. And I love that you called out that expression of throwing your hat over the wall, because we love that expression too. It's one of those things that kind of sticks with you.
Mm-hmm.
And so I just want to share where it comes from, just to set this up, because I think that's an interesting story. There was an Irish writer named Frank O'Connor. He's famous. You could Google him. He's written a lot of things, but when he talks about his own life and his autobiography, he talks about when he was a young boy. He grew up very poor, and he would, go to school in Ireland. And when he and his friends would take these walks through the countryside, they would come upon these high orchard walls, and they had to figure out how they were going to get over the wall so that they could keep going. And they would take their hats from their school uniform off their head and toss them over the wall. So they had to figure out how to get over. And we love this as a metaphor for life, because we know that when you're standing in front of the wall, it feels really insurmountable. Like you just think to yourself, I have no idea how I'm going to get over this wall. But when you commit yourself to getting over, your brain starts to get very busy figuring out how to do it, versus giving yourself all the reasons why you can't do it. They call that creative tension. And I find that to be so true in so many cases. So we ask people to think about where in their life they would love to, make something happen. And maybe they don't know the clear path to making it happen. So where could you throw your hat over the wall for something that you'd feel so great about, even if it's not clear to you in the present moment how you're going to do it?
Mm-hmm. I of course completely align with this. I align with your 5 principles, everything, and your language is so vibrant and action oriented, and what it also speaks to is even just the power of language. One of the things that you also talk about in the book, and again, I've pulled on this too, Wendy, because of my background in innovation and breakthrough kind of work. So I recognize some of your language that I really resonate with in this. So you talk about how imagine the possibility of your life just 1 year from today. And you say language creates reality. The belief that something is possible starts and is continuously reaffirmed in our language. And I know this to be true. The power of declaration. Think about this. I now pronounce you whatever you want to say, partner and partner.
Yeah.
It's a declaration that you brought something into being. So if you could say a little bit more about the power of declaring.
Yes. I think that it is one of the most, it's not only one of the most powerful things, but it's also can often be one of the first things, right, that happens. And for most of us, we don't like to make declarations. It feels very uncomfortable. And even the word declare, very rare domain of language. People don't like to do it because it puts you on the hook for something. And a lot of people feel fear around having to then follow through with it once they've said they're going to do it. And often the decision about whether or not to make the declaration, that's where almost all the suffering lies, is should I or shouldn't I? And, how do I, once you've actually declared something in language, a few different things happen. The first thing that happens is that it becomes something that could potentially happen, right? It doesn't mean it's a sure thing, but because it exists in speaking, it all of a sudden becomes something that could be possible. And so the very first thing is speaking it into a possibility. But the other thing that really happens once you do that is that you could tell other people what the declaration is,
Yeah.
which, they say when you write down a goal of any kind, you're 42% more likely to make it happen just by writing it down. But then when you say it to another person, particularly someone in your life that could hold you accountable, you're twice as likely to be able to make it happen. That's a really compelling statistic. If you're looking for better odds and you're thinking to yourself that it feels really uncomfortable to go for something that I don't know how to do. So those are just a couple of the ways that I think about making declarations and why language can be so incredibly helpful. The other thing I just want to say about language is not just as it relates to goal setting, but also, when you think about the words that you use to describe yourself, to describe other people, to describe situations, I think a lot of times people don't fully appreciate the power of those words. And I want to give you just one example that I think everyone will be able to relate to, because it's such a big watch out. And the first question we ask people in the vision exercise is we say, what are you known for a year from today?
Yep.
And we ask people to think about what is something you'd love to be known for that maybe is different than how you're currently known. And we say to people, the reason why this is such an important question is because when you're not thinking about this question at all, you might end up being known for something that you do not want to be known for.
Right.
People use language like, I'm so stressed out, I'm so busy, I am exhausted, to answer the question, hey, how are you? How's
Right.
your day going? How's your week going? And then we wonder why, when you go, if somebody was to go ask that person, what do you want to, what, tell me about that person. Tell me about Wendy. Tell me about Elise. And they say, oh, they're really busy. They're really
Right.
busy. And then, you're sort of wondering, well, why am I known for being someone who's really busy? It's all because of the language that you use and how that reaffirms that belief.
And what's really interesting about that, Wendy, listeners and viewers, think about this for a second. If what Wendy just said becomes true about you in other people's minds, now what's going to happen when there's a great promotion? You're probably not going to be approached because you're too busy, right? The word on the street is you're too
So
busy.
true.
So I love the intentionality of what you put forth. Love that, Wendy.
Thank you.
You're
Thank you.
welcome. And the other thing that I want to presence for our listeners and our viewers that I think is really powerful about the exercise you have in your book about creating that bold vision is you say that the most effective visions encompass our whole lives, all the things we care about, all the things we want deeply, all the things that light us up. I really think that's powerful because, boy, now you're talking about, again, this is the whole life that you're talking about architecting. And I love the idea, the promise of 1 year, by the way, Wendy.
Yeah, well, we should talk about both of those things. I think, first of all, the whole life, and this is really relevant to this notion of working on purpose, which I love the name of your podcast, because I do think that sometimes people don't work on purpose. They
Mhm.
almost work on accident or
Right.
hoping it works out, hoping that it's purposeful, hoping that it, and one of the things about writing a vision for your whole life is really looking at how does my work complement the rest of my life? How do I want to show up? How do I want to get better at certain things? How do I want my relationships to look, both professional relationships, personal relationships, so that you can have more intentionality around your whole life? And I just think people don't normally think about their life that way. They just kind of, they wake up on Monday morning and kind of go back to the to-do list that was left over from Friday, and then just sort of hit it hard for the whole week. And then they're exhausted at the end of the day, Friday, wondering why they didn't get more done and wondering why there's important goals that didn't get touched. And this is really the antidote to that. And you mentioned the notion of 1 year, and we were very, very thoughtful about the time length, because people have asked us, well, why 1 year? Why not 5 years? Why not 10 years? Why not give yourself a longer range? And the answer to that question is that it is extremely difficult to be specific and to be really paint a vivid picture of what your life could look like 5 or 10 years from today, because there's so many unknowns that really gets in people's way. Whereas when you think about your life in a year, you still have time to make things happen. A year is long enough to create great change and transformation in people's lives, but you don't have so many unknowns that you really can't paint a vivid and compelling picture, a picture that's compelling not just for yourself, but also for other people.
Yeah, it's tangible, right? I mean, I can see in a year, right? I mean, I can almost touch in a year, and 5 years is way too far, right? Way too
Yeah.
far. So I think it's brilliant. And it is that promise. I mean, we do want to live these beautiful, vibrant lives that are uniquely our own. And so I think what you have created in terms of your 5 principles and your plan and the exercise you have in your book is just beautiful. I fully align. I'm a fan. I'm in.
Thank you. Thank you. And the great thing too is that when we do workshops with people, and this notion of declaring a bold vision is really it's a foundational power principle in our system, but it's one of many.
Yeah, right.
But we always start with it, and we tell people that it's a practice. It's not a one and done. So, you write your vision, you read it every month, you read it to other people. We give people a lot of very actionable practices on how do you use your vision to your to your best advantage. And then when next year rolls around, you look at it again and you update it, or you might scrap it and rewrite it depending on the circumstances of your life. And it's an annual practice. And we say to people that when you write it, there should be things in there that feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
You're not just writing what's predictable in your life. You're really looking at what would I feel so proud to accomplish in my life? Who would I feel so proud to be in my life, even if it's not predictable, even if I don't know how? And what people share with us, and we've heard this from so many people, is a year later when we kind of come back and say, okay, how did it go? How did you do? And they say, I did so much more than I ever thought I would.
Right.
And even the things that I thought I had absolutely no idea, I took ground, even if I didn't accomplish all of it. And they think I should have played bigger, and next year I'm going to play bigger.
Right.
That's usually the reaction that we get.
What a beautiful contribution and impact, Wendy. Let's let our listeners and you're welcome, listeners and viewers, just kind of think about that as we go on our first break. We've been talking about first the importance of declaring a bold vision. After the break, we're going to get into talking about really fueling our confidence. So I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. We're on the air with Wendy Leschgold. She's the co-founder of Fast Forward Group, a professional development and executive coaching company. We've been talking about the book she co-wrote with Lisa McCarthy called Fast Forward, 5 Power Principles to Create the Life You Want in Just 1 Year. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Dr. Elise Cortez is a management consultant specializing in meaning and purpose, an inspirational speaker and author. She helps companies visioneer for greater purpose among stakeholders and develop purpose-inspired leadership and meaning-infused cultures that elevate fulfillment, performance, and commitment within the workforce. To learn more or to invite Elise to speak to your organization, please visit her at elisecortez.com. Let's talk about how to get your employees working on purpose. This is Working on Purpose with Dr. Elise Cortez. To reach our program today or to open a conversation with Elise, send an email to Elise, A-L-I-S-E, at elisecortez.com. Now, back to Working on Purpose.
Thanks for staying with us and welcome back to Working on Purpose. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez, as I too am dedicated to helping create a world where people realize their potential at work and are led by inspirational leaders that help them find and contribute their greatness. And we do business that betters the world. I continue to write my own books. So one of my latest books, which came out in March of 2023, is called The Great Revitalization, How Activating Meaning and Purpose Can Radically Enliven Your Business, which helps leaders to understand what today's workforce wants and then offers 22 best practices to help them create the environment in which they can find those things. You can find my books at elisecortez.com or also on Amazon. If you're just now joining us today, my guest is Wendy Leschgold. She's the co-author of Fast Forward, 5 Power Principles to Create the Life You Want in Just 1 Year. So I really appreciated too one of your principles here in your book, talking about the need to fuel our confidence, and not listening to that inner critic that some people really insist really does motivate them. So could you talk a little bit about the importance of deciding how to listen to that inner critic and what we can
Mm,
do better instead?
mm. Yeah, and I think it's worth noting that, we've worked with many really confident leaders. So I think, a lot of people say to themselves, okay, well, I'm really, really confident in all of these situations, but then I have a couple of situations or people,
Hmm.
and I'm not myself. And I just feel, either they feel the need to prove something or apologize for something, or imposter syndrome in some way. And we all know that when we're not feeling like we can, you know be fully ourselves, and we don't feel confident, it dramatically decreases the likelihood of success in the relationship, and then the outcomes that we're able to produce. And I think, what's notable is that our confidence is directly correlated to the relationship that we have with ourselves. And that, probably in your entire lifetime, when you think about, what are the most significant relationships that you'll have in your whole lifetime, the one with yourself is probably number one.
Yeah.
And so we want to be earnest about fueling that relationship so that we can feel proud of where we are in our life, who we are in our life, and the, kind of who we're presenting to the world. So that's, one of the key reasons why this matters so much. And we give people, and then people who are listening might be saying to themselves, okay, well, that all sounds great, but how do you do it? And how do I get more confident, especially with certain people in certain situations where it feels the most uncomfortable? And a lot of it is about practice. A lot of it is about adopting certain habits and practices that we can use again and again and again to fuel our own confidence in those situations. So I'm going to give you an example of what one of those is. There's not enough time to go through all of them, but I'll give you one. And one of them is that oftentimes we, especially in those situations and with those people, it's like if you kind of think in your mind, okay, who is that one of those people that I don't really feel confident with? It's useful to keep that person or group of people in your mind. Oftentimes what we're focused on in those moments and in those interactions is our weaknesses,
Right.
how other people are maybe doing it better, all of the things we wish we had done better, all of the reasons why we potentially might be unsuccessful in the interaction or in the results with that person. And that is the key of our focus. And, when you look at different definitions of the word confidence, one of the definitions of confidence is focusing on our strengths and abilities and qualities, right? The ability to focus on our strengths, abilities, and qualities. And if you're not in the habit with those people or in those situations of focusing on your strengths, abilities, and qualities, it's very hard to fuel your own confidence. So one of the practices we offer to people is really to think about, well, what are my strengths, abilities, and qualities, and how can I deploy them in those situations? And just like shifting your focus kind of away from all of the deficiencies and towards everything that you bring to the table. And many people just resist that, find it so hard
Yeah.
to do. Maybe they think, oh, I want to be humble. I don't want to be seen as somebody who is obnoxious or overly confident because it's not a good look. I think for many women, this is even more of a thing than it is for men, but it comes up for everyone. So it's a practice of focusing on your strengths, and it really, really helps.
Yeah, and you don't have to be broadcasting it out to everybody in the world, but to declare it for yourself, right? I mean, it's
Yes.
so powerful.
Yes.
I totally relate to that, Wendy.
Yeah.
Resistance to want to declare strengths. I've seen that as well in my work. One of the things that you alluded to earlier that I really want you to spend a little bit of time bringing to life for us here is you talk about, taking control of your time, energy, and focus, and that we can choose to tell ourselves an empowering story about our time, energy, and
Mm,
focus, that we have enough to choose how we want to use it. And this perspective can become our reality when you shift from being reactive to intentional. But people always say things like, one day when I have time, I'll go after really creating this life that I really want. When I have time, or I don't have enough time to do that. I can hardly get by with my day today. And I think the way you put forth in your book, the power, the opportunity to be able to change the story about that is really, really liberating and empowering. So if you could say a bit about that one for us.
Yeah. And the one about time, I mean, obviously people make up stories about all kinds of things.
Right.
I love that you brought up this notion of how we relate to time, because it's so pervasive for so many people. And the dominant story that most people have is, I don't have enough time
Right.
for this, that, or the other thing. And so,
Right.
like you said, they're looking for some mythical moment in the future where they'll maybe have enough time. Just like the days and the hours pass and it never comes. And, the story that I choose about time is that I have exactly enough for the things that are really important to me.
Right.
And sometimes when I say that to people, they're like, wait, can you say that again? Like, what do you mean? And really, what's at the heart of that story is, number one, belief in the possibility that could potentially be true, right? That
Yep.
this notion of I don't have enough time, there's no concrete truth in that. It's more just a perspective that we collect evidence for and adopt. And over time, we collect so much evidence for why we don't have enough time that it's very hard to believe any other statements around time, because the other one just seems so true. And yet it comes at a very high cost to
Right.
us.
Right.
And it's always in distinguishing the cost of these stories that we can sort of motivate ourselves to look for a new one. And the cost of saying I don't have enough time is happiness, peace, accomplishment, being able to pursue your dreams, relationships with people, a sense of presence, so many things. So I choose this other story. I have exactly enough time for what's important to me. And what's involved for me in that story, and really for anyone, is figuring out, well, what is important to you?
Right.
Because it's not everything, right? I have a lot of things that are important to me, but not everything. And so when you know what your benchmark is for what are the things that are the most important to you, it's very helpful in being able to weed out the things that are less important and just choose not to spend time on them. And then the things that are important, you're choosing, yes, I am going to spend time on them. And you mentioned this notion of being intentional versus reactive, which we do spend some time on in the book. And it for sure relates back to time and how we spend our time. But it also is really about how we are being in those moments of, like, when we're spending our time doing something, how we're showing up in those moments. And there's a story that I share in the book, it's, again, this is one that I think a lot of people will relate to. So I'll share it here as it relates to being reactive and then being intentional. And the story that I share is about my own addiction, if you will, to my phone.
Yeah.
And it kind of came to a head. I mean, it would be something I would joke about with people, that I was attached to my phone and I was always checking it, and I would make a little joke about it. But then there was an evening where I was at home with my husband, and we were in the middle of a conversation, and he was saying something. It was kind of like his mouth was moving, but I had absolutely no idea what he was saying because I was looking at my phone.
Mm-hmm.
And all of a sudden I look over at him and he's waving his hands in the air. And he said to me, Wendy, I'm over here.
Right.
Listen to what I'm saying. And it just hit me almost like between the eyes kind of thing, that I was completely checked out. I wasn't present. And I was trying to do 3 things at once on my phone in another land. And that I realized not only was I doing that with my husband in that moment, but that I was doing it with people all the time, whether they were in my professional life or my personal life. I also realized that not only was I doing it in the middle of conversations, but I was also doing it. I could be watching a movie, a really good movie.
Right.
I would still pick up my phone. And it was kind of like this automatic behavior
Mm-hmm.
where I was on autopilot. And I realized this was the classic definition of reactive behavior, because I was not thinking about it at all. It was just very habitual and very reactive. And so I thought about, obviously, there was a steep cost for that. Obviously, my relationship with my husband, other people, a sense of peace and calm, not feeling like I had to be always on all the time. That's a very, very, very steep cost for that reactive behavior.
Yeah.
Which then enabled me to look at, okay, if I'm going to create some radical change around this and I was going to be intentional, what would I have to do? What would be new things that I would have to do in order to do something about that addictive behavior to my phone? And I came up with some things that worked for me. And obviously everybody would come up, people come up with whatever works for them, but I needed certain guardrails. I needed guardrails at home. I needed guardrails in the office about how I could prevent myself from being on my phone in those moments when really what I wanted was to be present with people.
Right.
And I have taken major ground, and yet sometimes the train goes off the tracks and I get derailed, but I remind myself to get back on track, and people in my life hold me accountable because I told them this is in my vision, is
Right.
that I'm, present and patient and, looking at people in the eye when they're talking to me. And my husband knows he has permission to call me on it when I don't do it. And so does my, business partner, Lisa, my co-author. She knows she'll look at me. Sometimes we're on Zoom and she'll say, I know you're on your phone right now. Stop. Okay. So that's just, what it is to make those big behavioral changes that will, be in service of the things that are really important to you.
Yeah. And I love what you said earlier, one of the principles, enrolling others in that vision so they can help hold you accountable to that. I think it's just brilliant. Very hard to do this kind of big work on our own sometimes, right?
Yes. And also, Elise, the other thing that's really hard for many people in the workplace is to have permission from your manager, or if you're the manager, or, giving other people around you permission to hold you accountable for things.
Yes. Yes.
Sometimes people feel, oh, I could never tell my manager that.
Right.
That would be too uncomfortable. And yet, oftentimes when you're the manager and you read your vision to the people on your team, which is something we recommend people do,
Yep.
and you say to them, what I'd really like from you is I'd like you to hold me accountable for X, Y, and Z, because I know that's not going to be easy for me. And there's going to be times when I'm going to go off track, and I would really love that reminder. And then people have permission to help you. And that's really, really powerful. We've seen that in so many workplaces that we've worked in, and it makes such a big difference in the culture.
I totally see that. All right, let's give our listeners and viewers some time to also ruminate on that and think about what that would look like in their own lives while we take our next break. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. We've been on the air with Wendy Leschgold, the co-founder of Fast Forward Group, professional development and executive coaching company. We've been talking about her new book that she co-wrote with Lisa McCarthy called Fast Forward, 5 Power Principles to Create the Life You Want in Just 1 Year. We're going to continue the conversation after the break, and there's one powerful word in terms of creating and living that life that you really want in 1 year. There's a powerful 2-letter word that we're going to cover that's going to help you make that so. Stay with us. We'll be right back.
Dr. Elise Cortez is a management consultant specializing in meaning and purpose, an inspirational speaker and author. She helps companies visioneer for greater purpose among stakeholders and develop purpose-inspired leadership and meaning-infused cultures that elevate fulfillment, performance, and commitment within the workforce. To learn more or to invite Elise to speak to your organization, please visit her at elisecortez.com. Let's talk about how to get your employees working on purpose. This is Working on Purpose with Dr. Elise Cortez. To reach our program today or to open a conversation with Elise, send an email to Elise, A-L-I-S-E, at elisecortez.com. Now, back to Working on Purpose.
Thanks for staying with us and welcome back to Working on Purpose. I'm your host, Dr. Elise Cortez. As I mentioned in the last break that we had, the book that I just came out with, The Great Revitalization, what I did for you is I also created an assessment that you can use to be able to evaluate to the extent to which your company is living today's standards. It's available on my website, elisecortez.com. It will help you score, etc., and see just how you're doing and where you might want to shore things up. If you're just joining us today, my guest is Wendy Leschgold. She's the co-author of Fast Forward, 5 Power Principles to Create the Life You Want in Just 1 Year. So I dangled that little promise out there before the break on purpose because I think there's such power in little small words. And that little small word, of course, we're talking about is no. And I love how you talk about no is a complete sentence. It stands on its own, all by itself. But no can help us when we tell people no and we justify and explain why it doesn't fit into our overall vision. That can be so powerful for us, and it gives us back that time that we thought we didn't have. So if you could say a little something about this powerful little two-letter word that we have.
Yes, it's such a powerful word, and one that oftentimes I think people are afraid to use.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
And I think part of that fear comes from wanting to be liked, wanting to please, not wanting to be seen as someone who's not a team player. People don't like to rock the boat. They don't like to make waves. And so they avoid using that word. And I think one of the things that helps people use it more is having clarity and conviction around what's really important to you versus what is not a priority.
Yeah.
And so that it doesn't solve the discomfort completely, but it helps because at least you have some conviction around why you're saying no. Doesn't mean the other person necessarily cares. Sometimes they care, but sometimes they don't care. They're happy with just their no because then they're going to move on and ask somebody else. But other times you might feel that can be inspiring to share what you are committed to with another person. But one of the things we ask people to do is how people have their to-do list, right? This is the things that they're going to do. We have people do a say no list. And what are the things that you're being asked to do or that might be coming up over the next couple of weeks that you are intentionally going to either say no to, delegate, or just deprioritize? And unearthing what those things are can be really, really powerful for people because all of a sudden that notion of I don't have enough time and I'm feeling underwater and overwhelmed, the clouds start to part and people start to see, oh, okay, if I'm not doing all these things and I'm focusing on this big group of things that are going to move the ball down the field for me, I might be able to get somewhere. I might be able to achieve some of these things that are in my vision.
Right. I just think it's so powerful to learn how to do that. And you offer various ways in the book that people can do that. So we'll let them read from there.
Yes.
Related to that too, though, I also found your treatment of communicating with intention and to propel things forward, using language of action, specific and compelling, really quite important. And I found myself, I can recognize some of the language that I use that you think you're trying to be accommodating and, compelling, or no, not compelling, accommodating. And yet you lose your effectiveness. So if you could maybe give some examples of what, ineffective, indirect language looks like.
Yeah. Well, one of the ones I'll start with is the use of what we call disclaimers.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's almost like filler language because sometimes people are not even aware they're doing it. But an example of it would be a great example is when people are getting ready to share their vision with another person. Oftentimes they will start the sharing. They won't just launch into it and start reading it. They will say, well, this is kind of long, but just, here goes. Or I really need to do some more work on this. It's not quite finished, but here goes.
Right.
And those types of disclaimers can be used. People use it all the time in language. I really would love you to come to this party. You don't really have to because I know you are really busy and you have so many other things on your plate, and all of those disclaimers diminish possibility. They diminish your impact and they diminish the likelihood of somebody actually being present and saying yes.
Right. So what's the point of even putting it out there, right? You've just stopped the brakes on it.
Yes, exactly. And one of the conjunction, I think it's a conjunction that is used in almost all disclaimers is that 3-letter word, but.
Mm-hmm.
And a great substitute, we find that but is another really disempowering piece of language. And if you
Right.
can substitute it with and find the appropriate language there, it's much more expansive language. So that's another one to look out for, is where can I substitute instead of but, use and. Another good one that's easy for people to eliminate is unnecessary apologies.
Right.
The word just, I just want to tell you this one little thing. I just need a moment. Right? People try to fold themselves up into as small of a space as
Right.
possible.
Right.
And that word kind of helps them do it. And then the other one that I think this is one of those that the only way to get better at this is to practice and prepare and talk slower, is eliminating the filler words, number one, and using as few words as possible. Sometimes when we're uncomfortable, maybe we're making a request of someone,
Right.
asking somebody to do something, or sharing an idea. Maybe we feel a little nervous about it. We're making a recommendation, and we pile on so many words
Right.
that our main idea gets lost in the shuffle, and we don't even know that we're doing it. So that's another one. It's a big watch out for so many of us. It's just, even if it's practice it in the mirror, say it in fewer words, even if it feels a little uncomfortable, do it anyway. That's the best way to get better at that one.
Mm-hmm. I really relate to that one, Wendy. When I can use an economy of words, I do recognize I'm much more effective. I'm much more powerful. People listen to that in a different way. So I just think that advice is incredibly well taken. All right, so let's go on to one of my favorite aspects of your book, and that I really want to celebrate here, and that's the power of listening and adding curiosity to your practice. I mean, I know this for myself, Wendy. I mean, and I agree with you wholeheartedly that most people don't feel heard; they're starved to be heard. And the moment that's why what happens when people actually listen to them, sometimes they can go on quite a bit because it's so refreshing for them to actually have an audience that they're actually that's being listened. They're listening to them. So if you could say a little bit about that, and then I do want to read a little bit of an excerpt from your book that I think is so powerful.
Okay. Well, my feeling about this is that oftentimes people hear the word listening and they know, everybody says, I want to listen more. Everybody wants to get better at it. And so it's baffling why why is it not happening more? And I think that people, when you really get down to it, they have the intention of just wanting to contribute, but a lot of times that intention is sort of ill-placed. So instead of listening to just gain trust, understanding, have people feel heard, they feel they have to come in with a solution, or they have to add value, or give their point of view, or share an experience from the past. And yes, sometimes that is helpful,
Yeah.
but it's overused. And what's underused is the practice of just what we like to just call peeling the onion,
Right.
and having somebody be able to share as much as they want about a given topic. And we do this exercise in one of our workshops where we say to people, okay, one of you is going to be the person sharing, and one of you is going to be the person listening. And the person sharing, their job is to share about anything in their life they're excited about. Could be they got a new puppy, they're going on vacation, a book they read. And then the other person's job is you're not allowed to relate it back to you. You are not allowed to take the person on a tangent. Your job is to listen and only ask questions that would help them to be able to share more about the thing that they're sharing about. And they only have to do that for about 2 minutes. And when people come back from doing that exercise, they say, oh my God, I cannot believe how much self-management that required.
Right.
Because I wanted to say, oh, well, I got a new puppy too. Let me tell you about the time when I had to hire a trainer. It's just so hard for people to just be quiet
Right.
and listen to somebody sharing. And I don't think it's because we're bad people or anything like that. It's just not something we're used to doing. So it just takes, again, like anything, it just takes practice. And I think when you get into situations where the stakes are high, I just shared with you an exercise we do in a workshop where the stakes are extremely low. There is no need to come out with an outcome. But when you're talking to somebody and you really do you want to and need to help them out of a jam of some sort,
Right.
you feel an enormous amount of pressure to kind of quickly go into solution mode. And that is where I think listening suffers the most in the workplace, for sure, but even in people's personal lives as well.
Agreed. Well, what I want to do next is I want to read this passage, and listeners and viewers, as I read this to you, I want you to imagine that you could become someone who could listen like this, and I want you to think about the difference in your life that this would make, and your impact and results. So this is a direct quote from your book here, Wendy. You write about somebody else's work here. So you say, in her powerful book, Time to Think, Listening to Ignite the Human Mind, Nancy Kline explains that if you want to improve people's thinking, give them your full attention. Listen at the highest level and ask inclusive questions. She was inspired by the first excellent listener in her life. Quote, my mother's listening was not ordinary. Her attention was so immensely dignifying, her expression so seamlessly encouraging that you found yourself thinking clearly in her presence, suddenly understanding what before had been confusing, finding a brand new, surprising idea. You found excitement where there had been tedium. You faced something. You solved a problem. You felt good again. She simply gave attention, but the quality of that attention was catalytic.
That book, Time to Think, and then she has a follow-on, More Time to Think. Really, really brilliant book. I think Nancy Kline is brilliant. And she has this expression called listening to ignite. And I love that expression so much because people don't normally think that listening creates such a direct response in how somebody else is able to think. And when you set an intention to listen to ignite, you merely have to sit back and listen and ask questions. There's not a lot to do, if you will, but the impact is immense, as she describes in her book. But I love that term, listening to ignite, because it's a quick one and it's sticky, and it's a good thing for people to kind of hold on to.
And I think you do such a beautiful job in that chapter of talking about the promise of listening well and with curiosity. That, of course, I also firmly align with.
Yeah.
So
yeah, one thing I want to say about curiosity is that a lot of times people say, well, but what if I'm just not interested in that? What if I'm just not curious about that?
Right.
And I always say, you can generate curiosity at will.
Yeah, it's true.
Setting attention to.
It's amazing. It's amazing. Well, we're almost out of time, but what I want to do here toward the end of the show here, Wendy, is give you a chance to be able to presence the promise of living from your 5 power principles for our listeners and viewers. And maybe if you just want to walk through them quickly, and because we didn't actually say what those 5 principles are, but maybe we could end the show with that.
Okay. Let me grab this over here.
let me just consult my work.
Go from memory. Yeah. So you want me to just share what the 5 power principles are?
Because this really speaks to how we can create, the promise, what they promise to live our really best. That I think is so powerful.
Yeah. So the first power principle, and as I mentioned, the most foundational one, is to declare a bold vision and share it. And that's where we always begin. And for people listening to this, if you do nothing else coming out of listening to this podcast, you can write your own bold vision. And there's so much instruction and guidance on how to do that in the book. The second power principle is choose a new perspective. And that is really all about how do we shift the narratives and the stories that we tell ourselves that can be disempowering and negative and get in the way of us accomplishing what is important to us and being the person that we really want to be. So that's a really, really powerful, actionable practice there. We like to say we have 0% control over many of the circumstances of our lives. Like, think about the economy. We have limited control over other people, but we have 100% control and choice over our perspective. Power principle 3 is plan the work and work the plan. It's where the rubber meets the road. We give people a 90-day action plan. Like, how do you actually do it? Power principle 4 and 5 are both in the domain of communication. And so the fourth one is use language of action. It's really about gaining more distinctions around the language that we use and being more intentional about the language that we use. And then power principle 5 is stop talking and get curious. It's all about listening and how to use that even when the stakes are high to be able to build relationship, trust, and really produce results too at the end of the day. Those are the 5 power principles in the book.
That's a beautiful way to finish, Wendy. I want to say thank you so much for somehow coming into my world, and I got to read your book, sharing it with my listeners and viewers across the world. Thank you so much for joining me on Working on Purpose.
Thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
Listeners and viewers, if you want to learn more about Wendy Leshold or her business partner, Lisa McCarthy, the work they do at Fast Forward or their new book, Fast Forward, start by visiting simply fastforwardgroup.net. Last week, if you missed the live show, you can always catch it via recorded podcast. We were on air with Hortense Legentil, who coaches executives across the globe. We drew the conversation from her book, The Unlocked Leader, Dare to Free Your Own Voice, Lead with Empathy, and Shine Your Light in the World. She gave great insight into how we can identify our mind traps, operate a mind shift, and achieve a mind build. Next week, we'll be on air with Paulina Marinova Pompliano talking about the book that she wrote, Hidden Genius, The Secret Ways of Thinking That Power the World's Most Successful People. You will be delighted with the insights she provides about studying these remarkable people that you can build on and fold into yourself. See you there. Remember, work is one of the best adventures and means of realizing our potential and making the impact we crave. So let's work on purpose.
We hope you've enjoyed this week's program. Be sure to tune in to Working on Purpose, featuring your host, Dr. Elise Cortez, each week on W4CY. Together, we'll create a world where business operates conscientiously, leadership inspires impassioned performance, and employees are fulfilled in work that provides the meaning and purpose they crave. See you there. Let's work on purpose.